After Lucas got engaged, I handed in my resignation under the pretext of traveling. He raised an eyebrow and chuckled. Have fun and come back when you're done. I greedily gazed at his features and softly replied. Little did he know, I wouldn't be coming back. My life had a timer set by the system from the moment he got engaged. At a high-profile gathering, Lucas put his arm around my shoulder and introduced me earnestly as my sister, who wanted to explore the world, asking everyone to look after me. The light from the glass lamps above cast a clean glow on Lucas's sharply defined profile. He was a loyal friend, but I was despicable and base. Lucas would never know that the real reason I resigned was because I fell in love with him. When the system brought me into this world, Lucas was still an unrecognized illegitimate son, pushed out of the center of power to manage the family's peripheral industries. I applied to be his secretary. On my first day at work, Lucas sat back in his chair with a cigarette dangling from his lips, his polished shoes propped up on the desk. Find another job. There's no future following me, he said. I bent down, picked up the files he had tossed on the floor, and neatly stacked them on the desk. You make your own future, I quietly told him. Lucas, you'll surely become someone significant one day. Lucas seemed briefly stunned, his dark eyes staring at me for a long moment before saying a word. As I walked out, I glanced back at Lucas leaning in his chair. He tilted his head back, staring blankly at the ceiling, his eyes distinctively black and white, with a hint of moisture. That sense of youthful bewilderment and helplessness I had remembered for 10 years, from our first meeting until now. At Lucas's engagement ceremony, he seated me at the head table. I was too close to the bride, her wedding gown swishing past me, even revealing her large diamond ring on her hand. Lucas and the bride were in a business marriage without any genuine feelings. Seating me at the head table was his way of acknowledging my position, just like when he introduced me to everyone at the high society gathering. My sister, please take care of her. There was always a place for me in his heart, just not the one for love. The system said if Lucas didn't marry me, I would be eliminated. Go ask him, he'll agree, I smiled. Whether he loves me or not, marries me or not, it's his choice. 10 years of companionship doesn't mean he has to give me marriage. You go with me, eat well, live well, and have a say everywhere we go, Lucas once said when we were rejected by a business partner. That night, we huddled together under a bridge to keep warm, shivering. I squeezed my body, tears welling up, regretting that despite my love for roses, I had never received a red rose. I curled up, eyes red, thinking that when I arrived in Delhi, I would buy a bucket of roses for myself, the brightest and most vibrant kind that would lift my spirits at first sight. I slowly closed my eyes. As soon as I stepped out of the train station, I spotted a nervous young man in a wrinkled suit holding a sign waiting for me. He was a supplier's assistant for Lucas, explicitly instructed to take good care of me. Lucas's cooperation with Delhi wasn't intensive, so this special arrangement must have required much effort. I looked at him quietly for a few seconds and politely declined. No need, I want to wander around alone. You don't need to tell Lucas. In the last month, I didn't want any more entanglements with him. I found a bar to stay in. After being obedient for 2 lifetimes, on the brink of death, I wanted to taste the sensation of living recklessly. During the quiet hours in the bar, I took a stroll around the small town, chose a photo studio, and decided to take a farewell photo of myself. Hair loose, lips colored, edited to look even paler and prettier, smiling softly at the camera. In black and white photos, framed and held close to my chest, I walked out under the puzzled gaze of the photographer. Before my death, I unexpectedly died in a car accident that took away all my lifespan. Now being able to predict my own death and preparing everything in advance feels strangely wonderful. At night, swaying in the scent of cheap cocktails at the bar, moving my body to the lively music, my arms touching other bodies, or being touched by others. I turned my head, gave him a slight smile, then continued to revel in the nightlife, oblivious to life and death. This month, I did everything I wanted to do, but was previously restrained from doing. I did it all, and I got tired of it. Finally, I lay on the rocking chair, looking at the mountains and lakes, waiting for my own death. Lucas called me in the middle. He asked me in a gentle tone how I was enjoying myself. Before I could speak, I heard a coquettish voice on the phone. You didn't even notice me when you called. It was his fiancée. My blood suddenly chilled. I heard Lucas's helpless, soothing voice and the girl's dissatisfied mumbling. My blood warmed back up, my heart rate calmed down, and I smiled. It's pretty good. Lucas hung up the phone in a hurry. I held the phone, staring blankly at the green waves ahead. Before the engagement, Lucas didn't even know his fiancée. It had only been a little over half a month. I used to hear that people destined to fall in love would love each other at first sight, confirm their relationship in 3 days, be deeply in love within a week. I didn't believe it before, but now it seems I can't refute it. My body was getting worse, and I could almost feel the vitality draining from me clearly. The blood flowing under my skin was icy to the bone, cold enough that every cell was screaming in pain. 50 meters ahead of the bar, there is a stone bridge lined with red roses. In the soft wind, the fragrance of flowers fills the air. Below the bridge is a swift river, wrapping dry petals flowing towards an unknown abyss. Here is the place I chose for my death. I didn't want to die in a hospital, with tubes all over my body, lying lonely on a white hospital bed, waiting for death. One day, I received a gift from Lucas. He sent me exquisitely packaged candies, and an invitation card printed with him and his bride. The purple and gold box was filled with dark chocolate. I wiped off the blood from the corners of my mouth, tore open the bag, and with the taste of unfinished blood, put a piece of chocolate in my mouth. It was bitter yet rich. The first time I worked overtime with Lucas, I had low blood sugar, and he took out a handful of brightly packaged candies from the drawer. Eat a few, or your body won't hold up. I shook my head and softly said, I'm on a diet. I'm used to not eating sugar. Lucas's dark eyes stared at me for a moment, tugged at the corner of his mouth, and commented, fussy. A few days later, he had a friend bring back dark chocolate from overseas and pushed it in front of me. Keep this around. It helps with dieting. Don't starve yourself. It's not good for your body. The purple and gold packaging reflected Lucas's serious and focused face. That moment is the most memorable in my mind for the past 10 years. I finally found my existence in this world. Someone cared for me. Someone shared joys and sorrows with me. I continued to live as a real person in this world, not a puppet controlled by fate, heading towards an inevitable end with no choice. Countdown to death, 8 days. I received a call from Lucas's assistant, Jack. A polite and respectful tone from the young man, who had been with Lucas for 7 years. Christina, when will you be back? Some work needs to be arranged as soon as possible. I grabbed a handful of Dali soil and casually tossed it into the sky, responding nonchalantly. Don't arrange for me to come back. Find someone to take my place. Christina. Jack's tone carried a hint of difficulty as he carefully asked, are you not planning to come back? I told him not to tell Lucas for now. I pursed my lips. Jack was the assistant I personally trained, followed Lucas for 7 years, and also accompanied me for 7 years. I wanted him to handle things for me. The words were on the tip of my tongue, but I didn't know how to say them. Finally, I sighed. I'll send you an email in a week. Follow the instructions in the email. I told him gently, Jack, work hard in the future. If you get married, don't forget to burn some paper money to let me know. I realized it was not the right thing to say, stopped myself in time, and smiled apologetically at him. I just told him, keep it up, Jack. Maybe because I was close to death, these days I kept dreaming of past events, dreaming of my mother. Her figure in a tight dress outlined her graceful curves, her skin soft and fair like the most beautiful dancer in the palace. It was so different from her final days lying on the hospital bed, thin to just a skeleton, withered and brittle. The man she adored all her life, the man she willingly became a mistress for, never showed up at her bedside. Even when she made countless calls, hoarse from crying and begging him to come and see her, he just coldly said, you deserve to die. Go die with your daughter. Living will only bring disaster to others. As she cried hysterically, I sat on the edge of the bed, peeling an apple. The fruit knife slipped and cut my translucent fingertip. Fresh blood oozed out, which I wiped away expressionlessly. She cried uncontrollably, and I quietly watched for a while, finding it somewhat ridiculous. I went downstairs to buy apples again. As I stepped onto the road, the red light lit up, and the intoxicated truck driver absent-mindedly stepped on the gas. On the shattered glass, reflecting my flying body and terrified face. In the final moments before death, the woman was on my mind. I don't want her even in death. How will she live? 3 days until death. Maybe it was a last gasp. Suddenly, I had the strength to move. Wrapped in a long scarf, hair messily tied, with some lipstick and blush on, I aimlessly wandered on the cobblestone road. The little girl staring with envy at the sugar figures made by the roadside vendor, tugging at her mother's sleeve. Her mother, with a weary face, bent down in tears. We need to save money for Daddy's treatment, sweetheart. I stepped forward, bought a panda-shaped sugar figure, and handed it to the little girl. She timidly looked up, with her pure white face, and called me sister. The woman thanked me in a fluster. I watched them leave. Feeling tired from walking, I wanted to go back. But just as I turned around, on the steps of the town hall, I saw the face that I absolutely did not want to see at this moment, Jack. He saw me and ran over excitedly. Christina, Lucas is inside. Let me take you in, he said eagerly. I interrupted him. Why did you come here? There is a forum here, and Lucas was invited to attend. After explaining, Jack asked me, "Christina, where are you staying? I checked all the accommodation records in town and didn't find you. The bar didn't count as a formal residence, and I couldn't remember if I had registered." I tightened my scarf and slowly told him, "Jack, can you not tell anyone about me being here?" "Tell who?" Lucas's calm voice interjected. I immediately fell silent. It seemed that upon seeing Christina, his aging organs began to warm up, and blood regained its warmth, flowing through his veins with each heartbeat. I stood still, tilting my head, quietly watching him. Not much changed in him in a month, wearing a neatly ironed suit, shiny leather shoes, a neatly tied tie on his chest, still looking sharp, confident. He looked at me, furrowing his brow. "Why did you lose so much weight?" "Not eating properly." I shook my head. "Probably didn't adjust to the local environment, or maybe need to see a doctor." "No need, I'm fine." He waved off, trying to touch my head, which I evaded by turning my head. His arm paused briefly, then nonchalantly withdrew. Smiling, he said, "When do you plan to go back?" "In a couple of days," I replied with my head down. "I really like it here, want to play a few more days." He nodded slightly. "It's good to relax and have fun. When we get back, my wife and I will treat you to dinner." On the streets of Dali, the wind carried the scent of flowers. I easily caught the scent of roses. I like roses because that woman liked them. When she was most charming, she would twist her waist and tuck a brightly colored red rose into her hair. Also, because that year, when Lucas returned home, he faced the disapproving glares of many and defiantly cut off the Carolina red rose his elder sister had nurtured in a pot. Leaning against the table, he smiled and gestured for me to come over. "Christina, come here." Then he pinned the red rose in my hair. Blatantly and warmly, he displayed his favoritism towards me in front of everyone. It was at that moment that I began to wonder, could I really marry him and stay by his side forever? I smiled, tightened my scarf a bit, and asked softly, "And you, how long will you stay here?" 3 days. Lucas raised his hand, brushing against my forehead despite my resistance. Feeling the cold touch, his eyebrows furrowed slightly. "Are you really okay? Why are you so cold?" I shook my head. Lucas stared at me for a moment, his tone turning serious. "When we get back, I'll have someone arrange a full-body checkup for you." I didn't refuse. Lucas came over, lifted me horizontally, and sat me on a stone pedestal. "Rest for a while first, and then I'll take you around here, okay? Where do you like the most? Take me to see it." Just when my muddled brain was about to find an excuse to leave, Lucas's words, with a smile, interrupted me, throwing me back into torment. I pushed him away anxiously, standing with my transparent, pale skin facing the sunlight. "Lucas, do you know, you're married. We shouldn't be like this anymore." Lucas was stunned, straightened up, his face somewhat distant. "Whether I'm married or not, Christina, you are the most important person to me, always will be, forever, the most important person with no blood or legal ties." In the world of grown-ups, these two words shouldn't coexist. Looking up at Lucas's tall, smiling eyes and brows, I suddenly didn't want to pretend anymore. I asked him, "Lucas, do you know that I like you?" Lucas knew, of course, he knew. I'm not a good actress, can't hide my emotions or disguise my overwhelming love. In every move, every glance, every unfinished tone, even in a moment of uncertainty, I revealed my feelings thoroughly. He knew, but never responded. Lucas's hand clenched involuntarily into a fist. He opened his mouth, but didn't say anything. I looked at him and whispered, "Since you know, Lucas, please don't appear in front of me again. Give me some time to rest and forget the feelings I have for you. Can you do that?" Lucas left. On the deserted street, only the wind carrying the scent of roses and the noise of children playing remained. A familiar taste of blood rose in my throat, and I gradually came back to my senses, feeling the presence of my limbs and veins. I lied to Lucas. I don't want to forget my feelings for him. My admiration for him is the only thing I feel in this strange world. It hangs my life, making me feel at least like a person, not just a monster created by code, existing solely for a mission. As the bitterness in my throat subsided, I pushed myself off the wall, slowly stood up, and walked back to the bar. 2 days until death countdown. In the early morning, I squatted in a sea of roses, wrapped in my coat, digging the soil with force. Someone patted my head. It was the son of the bar owner. Innocent and sunny, with dark tan skin, he smiled, revealing white teeth. At such an ambiguous and innocent age, I didn't want to leave any psychological shadow on him. I dropped the shovel, struggled to stand up, took 3 steps back, and asked him expressionlessly, "What's up?" He seemed a bit unsure, extended his arm, revealing a steaming bun. "You're up early, haven't had breakfast yet. I bought this for you." "Thank you." I smiled and declined. "I don't need to eat anything, it's not good for health." I have someone I really like. I told him. I won't like anyone else in my lifetime. I picked a rose, quietly removed the thorns on it, and said softly, "Stay away from me, it's good for both of us." The boy quickly ran off, his eyes full of brokenness and sadness. The bun was thrown on the ground, still warm, infused with the fragrance of roses. I picked it up, looked at it quietly for a moment, then threw it in the trash can, wrapped in my coat, and went back to the bar. As soon as I entered, I could feel something was wrong. The landlady's loud voice was gone, the clattering of washing dishes and glasses disappeared, and everyone was silent, looking nervously at the perpetrator of the blue cocktails at the bar, Lucas. Beside him was Jack, looking anxious. I hesitated, walked over, and asked in confusion, "How did you guys come here?" Lucas looked up, smiled at me. "Christina," Jack said, "aren't you planning to go back?" His voice was gentle, but somehow chilling. I shivered. The surroundings were too quiet, making me nervous. I adjusted my coat. "Let's talk in our room, not here." In the small and shabby room, the walls were covered with moss, and the air was filled with the smell of decay. Lucas sat on the single bed, looked around, and slightly tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Not going back. Are we staying here from now on?" I handed him a glass of water. "At least it's livable." Lucas chuckled, said nothing, but his attitude showed enough. He seemed irritable now, losing his composure and manners, not hiding his disdain and annoyance in his words. Taking a deep breath, Lucas asked me seriously, "Why don't you want to go back?" "I don't want to," I said, holding the paper cup. "After working for so many years, I want to relax." Lucas held back his anger. "Christina, our home is built together by us. You can't just leave like this." He said it sincerely and earnestly, trying to persuade me not to leave, but I felt helpless. Do I have to reveal everything before he's satisfied? I interrupted him. "Let me go, Lucas. It's better for both of us. Let me quietly die here, in the rose garden, smelling the strongest fragrance, ending my unwelcome life." Lucas fell silent. After a while, he stood up straight, reached out and patted my head. With a touch of helplessness in his tone, he said, "Christina, you are the most important person in my life. Just tell me, and I'll give you everything." 10 years, a lifetime. How many 10 years can one have? Can you really let go of all the bonds between us? Such noble words. Every sentence is accusing my heartlessness and betrayal, putting himself in a pitiful position, garnering pity. No wonder he defeated 3 giants with just his eloquence at the bidding session, and became famous overnight. I looked up from his defined jawline, saw his slender profile, and then his eyes, full of tenderness. He was looking at me with affection. It felt absurd. I leaned in close and asked him slowly, "Lucas, what does it mean for me to go back? What does it mean to stay by your side? Can't you understand? You know very well that I like you, and as your secretary for 10 years. I will be in an awkward position after you get married." But I pretended not to see it, not to understand it. Just kept accusing me of being heartless. A nearly absurd idea floated in my mind. He knew everything. He was just pretending not to. Not willing to give up the benefits of the arranged marriage, yet unwilling to let go of the gentleness and smiles I gave him. His waiting for me to take the initiative, to abandon morality and conscience, to kneel down at his feet. I stared into his eyes and asked softly, "Lucas, in what capacity do you want me to stay by your side forever? As a sister with no blood relation, a secretary closer than a wife, or maybe, a secret lover kept in the shadows?" His face turned deathly pale for a moment, panic streaking across his normally unruffled eyes. He really thought that way. He wasn't as noble as I thought he was. I chuckled softly and with all my might, I raised my hand and slapped him. Watching his slanted body, feigning innocence, his throat tightened, blood trickling out, with an extreme mix of disgust and melancholy. I wiped the blood from the corner of my mouth, stared at him, and coldly spoke. "Lucas, you are truly disgusting." Lucas hung his head and didn't speak for a long time. After a while, he whispered, "I didn't mean for you to be a lover, but I can't deny that I did consider wanting you to stay by my side forever in that capacity. I apologize for my despicable thoughts, but Christina, I really do want to keep your heart. You are the most important person in my life, always the one I close my eyes to," mocking with bitterness. "Lucas, do you think that, no matter what you do, I will never leave? That I will always willingly follow you, be your shadow, without expecting anything in return?" When he agreed to the engagement, he never thought that I would be so determined to leave. Maybe he knew I would be upset, but he thought that if I just cried in hiding and he tried to comfort me, nothing unexpected would happen. Because I'm so resolute, I don't need to care. It's really quite funny. Lucas couldn't deny it, just said softly, "In these 10 years, I've faced a lot of betrayals. They all used me as a stepping stone to join others. Only you, from beginning to end, have always been by my side. Before the engagement, I didn't know that you would mind this marriage so much. Or even want to leave because of it. Christina, if calling off the engagement can make you stay, I can do it at any time. Only when Lucas realizes that I really want to leave will he try to remedy the situation. He quietly used negotiation skills, observing my expression without a sound, thinking about how to achieve his goals while maximizing his benefits. He grew up in an orphanage, lacking basic moral education, perhaps still unable to understand until now. Why would a marriage without a foundation of love, a contract bound only by law, make me so determined to leave? I pulled the corner of my mouth. Suddenly Lucas reached out and grabbed my wrist. Ignoring my struggles, he pushed up my sleeve, revealing the scars on my elbow. Once a gruesome wound, now only a thin line. He touched it with his fingertips and said softly, Christina, standing in this position, I have countless ways to keep you with me. Threats, imprisonment, even intimidation. You have too many things and people you care about. I just need to grab one, and you will never escape. But I don't want to do that. He touched the scar on my elbow, his expression flashing with tenderness. When you took that blow for me back then, I swore that I would never let anyone bully you again. But I can't stand. His dark eyes fixed on me, his voice soft, but unquestionable. So, Christina, I'll ask you one last time. Are you willing to go with me? I stared at him, from his lips to his nose, then to his expectant eyes. Lucas' eyes were beautiful, slightly curved at the corners, always watery, carrying a variety of emotions, captivating. The moment I saw him, I was drawn to his eyes, then fell into the abyss. Until now, I realized that Lucas, a cold and heartless capitalist, has no place worthy of my love. I leaned in and told him slowly, it's been a long time since I decided to not block a blow for Lucas. At that time, he was barely 20, with a hint of youthful vigor. That day, we made a contract and were excited to celebrate. On the bustling street, his older brother blatantly sent men to knock us out and threw us into a dark, secluded alley. There, guarded by 4 greasy strong men, they were ordered to destroy me and chop off one of Lucas' hands. That night, amidst wind and rain, the thugs grabbed my hair and pushed me into the water, my consciousness gradually fading, with a mist in front of my eyes, the pain and despair on my body almost killing me. Until I saw the chilling blade. With almost no hesitation, I struggled and pounced, taking that blow for Lucas. Sirens sounded, and we were saved. I woke up in the hospital, and as soon as I opened my eyes, Lucas held me tightly. His tears seeped into my clothes, poured across my chest, piercingly cold. From that day on, Lucas changed. He was no longer kind, no longer left any room for forgiveness, became ruthless and cruel, shocking. He turned into a business person who served only for profit. When Lucas talked about the alliance, he once said to me, the whites have a strong foundation abroad, and he needs the whites' power to reach a higher level. At that time, I asked him, so even marriage has to be used for business? Lucas smiled, patted my head. Why not? Why not? Faced with Lucas, who had been corrupted by power and money, I couldn't find any words of rebuttal. My wholehearted theories seemed like child's play in his eyes, too naive to be worth mentioning. Lucas imprisoned me. 4 bodyguards took turns guarding the door of the room, not allowing me to go out. Every time I reached the entrance, I saw their respectful yet nervous expressions. Letting you go out means we lose our jobs. Christina, please pity us, the burly men pleaded in an awkward tone, successfully halting my steps. Lucas is right. I have too many vulnerabilities. Grabbing onto any one of them is enough to keep me trapped. I can't escape, so I chat with the system. It is puzzled. Isn't getting married at this point an easy task? As long as you say something, he can't just watch you die. I smiled, feeling the familiar rush of blood in my mouth, swallowing it without expression, and skillfully wiping it away with a tissue. I whispered, if you want to get married, why wait until now? Even if I told Lucas at the beginning, he would never let me die. He would definitely, like today, use all his skills to keep me, using every trick in the book. He would give me the grandest, most unforgettable wedding, showing his deep affection in front of everyone, at any cost to keep me alive. Throughout, it's not that I can't live, I simply don't want to live. The system froze, crackling with electric energy, for a while before sounding astonished. Why? Do you know why Lucas is so confident that I will never leave him? Because of this stupid task. I came to this world for Lucas. Everything in the past 10 years has revolved around him. If I leave him, I will die. So I have to follow him forever, like the most faithful dog. But this is a task requirement. Yes, it's a task requirement. The price I pay to stay alive. I changed the subject and asked it, do you think this kind of strategy, task has any meaning? We gave you a new life in exchange for the data you want. Fair enough. Survival is a biological instinct, and the task gave me the opportunity to survive. I should be grateful. But why, being in it, All I feel is oppression. For 10 years, I have revolved around Lucas. No freedom, no autonomy. Everything I do is no longer for myself, but for Lucas. These two words have become almost a nightmare in my life. Lucas said that people around him come and go, and the only one who hasn't betrayed him is me. But do you know, Lucas, I have also thought of betraying, of leaving, of using you as a stepping stone to reach a higher and better position. But it can only be a thought, because in this stolen life, I have no choice but to stay by your side. I resent this kind of life. Rather than living the rest of my life without dignity, freedom, or choice, I would prefer to choose death. After a long time, the system said softly, but no matter what, staying alive is the most important. As long as you're alive, there's hope. I know, I chuckled softly. So initially, I also hoped that Lucas would take the initiative to marry me, hoping that in his eyes, I could surpass the so-called interests and considerations. I hoped that his true feelings for me would give me a reason to succumb to this pitiful fate. But in the end, I was still disappointed. In this lonely other world, I still haven't received any pure sincerity. I'm tired and don't want to suppress myself anymore, obeying this ludicrous fate. Actually, death might be a kind of liberation for me. On the last day, I woke up very late. I dressed and took a hoe to the bridge by the rose field. The bodyguards tried to stop me, so I called Lucas in front of them. His voice was gentle. Have you figured it out? Lucas, come find me, at the stone bridge in front of the bar. I whispered, I have something to tell you. Lucas paused, said okay. His voice sounded faintly excited. With my current body, I could barely lift the hoe. I struggled to drag it, step by step downstairs. The landlady's son couldn't bear to watch, and took the hoe from me. Where are you going? I'll take you. I thanked him. Lucas's engagement banquet was at noon. My death was also at noon. The bridge glistened in the sunlight, shining on the stone bridge railings. The young man handed me the hoe, looking worried. Are you really okay? I shook my head, tugged at the corners of my pale lips, and thanked him. My body ached so much that I almost crouched against the bridge pier, sweat pouring from my forehead, drops rolling like sweat beads. My vision gradually began to blur, biting my lip, a mix of blood from my throat and lip biting, my body almost icy. I held back for a long time, propped up against the stone pillar, wiped the sweat from my forehead and blood from the corners of my lips. Struggling to stand, I loosened the rose's soil with the hoe, squatted down, and kissed the thorny branches. In the corner of my eye, on the other side of the stone bridge, Lucas's figure appeared. He hurried over. Why is your face so pale? Did you not rest well? He held me, his eyes filled with genuine concern and worry, as if I were truly a precious treasure in his hands. I threw the hoe to the ground. The blood-red countdown, the hour hand section, was already empty. My life began counting down by seconds. Leaning on Lucas, I looked into his eyes as he held me, openly showing his anxious and worried expression, like I was the gem he held in the palm of his hand. I stood upright, facing the wind, raising my head, and looking at him directly. I said, you are shameless, despicable, and vile. Even with your high status, it can't hide the blackness inside. If given another chance, I would definitely not want to meet you again, not ever. Lucas's composed mask gradually shattered, revealing a ferocious interior. He shook my body in despair, saying, Christina, you should have known what kind of person I am. I am selfish, cold, ruthless, but I have never used these means on you. I am not cruel, because without you, Christina, I wouldn't have made it until now. Why do you have to accuse me? Why do you, too, want to leave me? Tears streamed down his face with red eyes. He held me tightly, crying on my shoulder, just like that year when I shielded him from the knife. We've been through so many years together, Christina. Why do you deny everything between us? You are so important to me that I am willing to do anything for you. Christina, why be so cruel to me? Cruel, I replied softly. Just a few words, no damage done, no bones broken. It doesn't hurt as much as the repeated torment from fate. My hatred towards fate has no outlet, so it falls upon you. Anyway, you're not innocent. My voice softened as I patted his shoulder, asking gently, Lucas, will you marry me? Think about it, no rush. Arrange everything first, then come back to me. I'll be waiting forever. I'll never leave. Forever. I gave Lucas an illusory dream, to hold on to as if it were a treasure in his palm, until the day the dream shattered. Lucas left, disheveled with bloodstains from my mouth on his clothes, but he was too panicked to notice. He will marry me. He has genuine feelings for me. Just needs time to think, to weigh pros and cons, to consider the gains and losses. I, on the other hand, don't need such a thoughtful affection. I leaned against the stone pillar, blood staining my lips, neck, and clothes. Lucas's expression when he learns of my death should be quite spectacular. He will break down, cry, lament, regret his hesitation, and never find solace. It's not revenge. I don't hate Lucas. I just wickedly hope that even if he finds new love, even if he moves on, even if he meets someone better, there will always be a place for me in his heart, whether it's regret, hatred, or an inescapable nightmare I've stirred up. I smiled, thinking of my mother who interfered in others' marriages without morals. What is the difference between us, really? Standing on the edge of the bridge, facing the rushing river, and the scent of roses in the wind, I spread my arms and jumped. Let me have a dream from which I won't wake up. In that dream, I'll be free, passionate, walking in the sunlight, for myself alone. No obligations, no strategies, no arbitrarily erased lives. I'll live grandly, for myself alone, forever. Lucas's epilogue. Christina was dead. The chaos outside, surrounded by police, standing on the outskirts. I heard that familiar name and looked at Jack. They said, "Who died?" Jack's face turned pale, kneeling on the ground, tears streaming through his fingers. I stared at him in confusion. Why is he crying? Who died? Christina. Impossible. How could she be dead? She can't be dead. As if gone mad. I crossed the police line, rushing to see the swollen, pale body soaked in river water. The white cloth was pulled back, revealing a swollen, white, and hideous face, extremely familiar yet nightmarish. Stumbling backwards, I fell into the mud, hands pierced by gravel, blood dripping, but I didn't care, murmuring to myself, already chubby, now even uglier. Wake up, listen to me, I don't mind, okay. I have lost consciousness, and can only rely on instinct to crawl to her side. Trembling fingers reaching out to touch her face. Tears flow uncontrollably. I cradle her head, facing the sky, and cry out loud. The scene that day was chaotic and bizarre. I cried like a child, almost hyperventilating, my head buzzing non-stop, until I passed out on top of her. When I woke up in the hospital and opened my eyes, I blurted out, "Christina," then saw her handing me water. My heart relaxed, and I gasped for air, telling her, "I just had a dream. I dreamt that you had died. Isn't that funny?" Her hand holding the water paused. Jack stood by the hospital bed, wanting to say something but hesitating. I sensed something was wrong, turned my head, and saw Maria, my fiancée. Everything was proceeding smoothly. The new secretary hired to replace her was diligent and responsible, making better coffee and prettier latte art. Jack spoke less but remained strict. The wedding preparations continued. The venue and MC were all arranged, and several celebrities had been invited to avoid losing face. Everything was normal and going smoothly. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, smoking and talking to myself in front of the glass. Despite losing you, I was still doing well, with no changes in my personal or professional life, still thriving. You see, what is regrettable is that your clean glass reflected my tired face, empty, just me. My eyes suddenly reddened. I thought if no one mentioned her, I could gradually forget about her. All traces of her were covered up. I thought forgetting her would be easy, until the day Maria asked me to accompany her to try on wedding dresses. Since I was free, I went with her. When Maria came out in her dress, I glanced casually from her high heels, up her slim waist outlined by the fishtail design, to her bun with a crown on top. Something felt off. If her legs were a bit longer, waist a bit slimmer, cheeks a bit fuller, eyes slightly more uplifted, and lips not the right color. She liked rose red, even made me help her choose it. Then it hit me suddenly. Who was I thinking about? My breathing suddenly grew heavier, and I walked away, without paying attention to Maria's voice behind me. Getting in the car, gripping the steering wheel, I closed my eyes, forcing my heartbeat to steady. Just this morning while brushing my teeth, I was thinking I rarely thought of her lately. I must be on the verge of forgetting her. But why did she infiltrate my mind like a ghost? I felt somewhat irritated. I stepped on the gas pedal, speeding along the mountain road, with the window rolled down all the way, the mountain wind blowing fiercely, waking up my sweaty forehead. When feeling frustrated in the past, she used to accompany me, racing here. Despite clutching the seatbelt tightly, and pretending to remain calm, she would tell me back then, "Everything will pass, you have to look ahead. Everything will pass, including forgetting you." I parked the car at the mountaintop, half crouched down. I looked at the morning glories by my feet, smiled, plucked one out of habit, ready to hand it to someone behind me. "How come you like these cheap flowers?" No one answered behind. I froze, the wind in my ears halted, even the river below the cliff seemed frozen at that moment. The blood in my body turned ice cold. I blamed it on the emotional scene. The day after the wedding ended, I took my assistant abroad. Maria's family kept bombarding me with phone calls, so I absent-mindedly answered Maria's call. "I don't care about your problems. Don't bother me either." Maria hesitated nervously. "Not many people in this circle are clean." I sneered. It was the right time to expand into new markets abroad, with a lot of work that kept me busy. I worked late into the night daily, sleeping in the office. My assistant lost 10 pounds following my work schedule, until he couldn't take it anymore and asked for time off. Seeing his pale face, I felt weak, and remembered her again. During the first 3 tough years, she worked overtime with me, even harder than me, occasionally complaining about her hair loss. You go do it. My complexion turned pale. Get some rest. The view outside the window was vibrant and bustling. She loved floor-to-ceiling windows, saying they were bright and refreshing, so no matter where I went, the decor was basically the same style. Parisian air was damp, always carrying the scent of rain and dew, reminding me how she disliked humidity, always having dehumidifier bags ready. Although she had never been to Paris with me, standing on the Champs-Élysées, everything I saw seemed to carry a trace of her. Her laughter, her playfulness, pulling my sleeve and saying she wanted ice cream. But when I bought the most expensive ice cream, reaching out to hand it to her, she vanished again. Like her shadow and playfulness were just lingering traces in my mind. The ice cream had melted halfway, sticky on my hands. I watched for a moment and licked it. Isn't sweet food bad for dieting? How can you eat this sweet ice cream? Wake up and tell me. Okay, if you wake up, I'll invest in researching sugar-free milk tea and yogurt, and open a factory to produce sugar-free products for you. As long as you wake up, I'll give you anything you want, alright? Tears welled up, a tickle at the tip of my nose. Tears hung on my cheeks, and I couldn't be bothered to wipe them. I suddenly felt pathetic, struggling to forget her, desperately trying to prove she was just an ordinary woman to me, that her death wouldn't affect me, trying to cover up my fragile ego. But who would believe it? Jack, Maria, even those business partners dared not mention her, looking at me with pity. Yes, pity. At this point in my life, receiving pity from others was laughable. I crouched down, clutching my chest, feeling hollow and lost, tears streaming down my face, trickling into my throat, the bitterness piercing my heart. When I raised my head, I thought I saw Christina, wrapped in a shawl. She stood in front of me, assessing for a moment, then reached out her pure white hand. Feeling wronged, I refused to shake it, staring at her face, hoping she would soothe me and talk to me. But she withdrew her hand, shook her head, her voice gentle, but also very cold. Lucas, no one will wait for you. And then she was gone in an instant. I lunged towards her, tripped on the marble floor, blood oozing from my forehead, my glasses shattered, the world spinning around, still reaching out stubbornly, bumping into poles, hitting rocks, falling into bushes teeming with insects. In the end, I knelt on the ground, looking up, blood and tears mixing, dripping into the corners of my mouth, desperate. Everyone told me that time could heal everything. I believed them. Since that night in Paris, Christina became my taboo, a topic no one dared to mention. I busied myself with work, as if being busy could make the pain of her absence go away. I climbed to the highest position in 10 years, standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of the company. Beneath my feet was wealth, power, countless praises and flatteries, a harbor that everyone envied. 10 years. I thought, if I ever see Christina again, I could casually say, see, I'm doing fine without you, married and successful. She stood there in a plain white dress, quietly watching me. Then she walked up to me, grabbing my tie. I fell apart in an instant. Years of experience told me, emotions, whether joy, anger, greed, delusion, should be restrained, never to be displayed in public. But as I held her, tears uncontrollably streaming down my face, my arms embraced her tightly, as if wanting to swallow her up, squeeze her into my body, hold her in my pocket forever, never letting her go. I regretted it. I truly regretted it. She had told me more than once that there are things more important than benefits in this world. It was my negligence, my disbelief, my arrogance and recklessness, that drove her to her death. She should hate me, blame me, resent me, want to crush me into dust. I would take it all, as long as she could vent her anger. But after spending so much money on gods and spirits, can I shamelessly ask for another life? A life with you, can I? After day in and day out of dullness, I wandered to Dali, standing by the stone bridge where she jumped, lost in thought. She was afraid of the cold. So what kind of mood was she in when she plunged into the icy river? She was afraid of pain. Did she curl up when her nose and mouth were submerged in water, wanting to cry for help, wanting to scream in pain? I crossed the stone bridge, standing on the bridge, looking down at the rushing river, the white waves wrapped in red rose petals, and the rugged rocks everywhere. I seemed to see her. I saw her closed eyes and the smile on her lips. I opened my arms, straightened up, and fell straight down. I took a step forward, the feeling of weightlessness hitting my brain, a dizzy spell. 10 years, alone. I spent 10 years in this world. Time did not diminish my feelings for her, Instead, every word and action of hers formed clearly in my mind. In these 10 years, every midnight awakening, every nightmare, I curled up, holding her photo, repeating and reminiscing about her. Christina once told me, no one cannot live without the other. At the time, I nodded in agreement, but now, I want to tell her, no, I really can't live without you. So, next life, have some mercy on me, okay?